Come along with us as we explore the broad world of preservation and the work being done to preserve, interpret, and save our past in a 21st century world. From aquaculture to historic foodways to forensic modeling, we're talking weekly with experts from across the globe. This is your host, Nick Redding. Welcome to PreserveCast. The Landmark Trust USA is a nonprofit preservation organization stewarding historic buildings in Vermont. As part of their mission, they make these unique properties available as overnight rentals, giving people the chance to experience history firsthand. Their sites include Rudyard Kipling's Nalaka Estate, carriage house and stable, a former maple sugar house, a farmhouse overlooking an apple orchard, and an early 1800s brick cape house. More information is always available at landmarktrustusa.org. This is Nick Redding. You're listening to PreserveCast. Today, we are going to be talking about opening architecture to everyone, and we're going to be doing that with Kevin Miller, who is the president of the board of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. So acting as the president of BAF, as it's sometimes referred to, Kevin and his team have been focused on delivering opportunities for people to get engaged with architecture, and one of their big primary principal programs is something called Doors Open Baltimore. And we're going to be talking about what that means and why it's of value to let people see inside buildings, and by extension, sort of see inside different organizations, companies, institutions, agencies, all sorts of things that they get a chance to look at. But before we get there, we love to get to know the people that we're talking to. So, Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? What kind of created this interest in architectural history and architecture itself? And then maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you're at right now professionally.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in the kind of the suburban no man's land between Ann Arbor and Detroit. So that being said, I did not grow up in any sort of architectural mecca. A lot of vinyl clad homes, cookie cutter houses. I'm pretty sure my mom is like single-handedly perpetuating urban sprawl. But college came around and we got to a point where you had to take the career aptitude test. And all signs pointed to that I should be a landscape architect because I wanted to do plants, people, and design. And then I went down to school at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. I started as a landscape architect. I realized very quickly that I love plants, but I did not care which way water flows on a site or dirt conditions. That was just not my interest. And from there, I kind of flopped into architecture. There are a lot of people that have like these crazy stories of, I knew I want to be an architect from a very young age, and I kind of have found this love in adulthood. There were some trips I had during college that I think really opened my eyes. And one of those was taking me into Detroit. I mean, growing up in the suburban region outside of it, I was kind of always told to be afraid of Detroit. And then once I finally went there with the architectural mindset and a more open mindset that I think getting out of my hometown lent me, I really saw how much good architecture and thoughtful and intentional design can do on the preservation side, and then also kind of the infilling side of things. And then from here on out, it has been just finding ways to, I think, better the world through intentional design. After I finished up school, I came out to Baltimore. I have no real ties to the city, but I think it goes along with the notion of found family. Is I came out here knowing nothing, and I fell in love with it. I think sometimes it fights you like family does, but I have no place that I would rather be than Baltimore. And I'm currently a practicing architect at a firm here called Design Collective, and I mostly do K through 12 education work, mostly because I found that is probably one of the quickest gateways for me to make an impact on the communities of the surrounding city and counties. by trying to better the education market.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, so I'm curious with the work that you're doing, is it a lot of retrofit of existing? Is it a balance? Is it new build as well as, because, we hear a lot, particularly in the preservation community, people are very excited about well, I don't know if excited is the right word, but they're interested in this stat that says that AIA has been talking about that, as the years go on, we're seeing more and more billings for existing architecture, refitting existing versus just building new. And that speaks to the need for people working in preservation, for tax credits, for people doing the hands-on work associated with retrofitting existing structures. So I know that that's sort of a balance out there. Your work at Design Collective, is that sort of on balance, or how does that kind of shake out?
For my work in Design Collective, it is on par with that stat. Over the last, I think, 10 years, there was a major influx of money for new construction schools, and those pools of money have dried up. And it's a larger conversation, but everyone is very aware of aging infrastructure, and schools are no different. And a lot of those like smaller projects are finally coming to the forefront of upgrading these existing schools to bring them up from the 50s, 60s, and 70s when they were first built, and making them, I think, really proactive education centers for the students and then the surrounding communities that actually are going to be utilizing those spaces.
Well, it sounds like we should have you back just to have a conversation about education, architecture. So most people know that PreserveCast is powered by Preservation Maryland, and that statewide nonprofit did a whole study, a context study on the history of school construction in Maryland and sort of these patterns of history associated with it, which we felt like could be kind of used towards, thinking about what worked, what didn't, what needs to be saved, what doesn't need to be saved, what do we have a lot of, what do we not have a lot of, and obviously that's playing out in your day-to-day. But we didn't bring you here to talk about your day-to-day. We did bring you here to talk about Doors Open. So talk to us about, well, maybe before we even get there, the organization that runs this is the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. What does the Baltimore Architecture Foundation do, and what do you as president do for it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll be wholly transparent that it's been around for just shy of 40 years. It was founded by Walter Chamu, who's a relatively big name in the architecture community of Baltimore. And it was really just founded as kind of a counterpoint to AIA, which is the Professional Architecture Organization. The BAF was supposed to be kind of architectural appreciation for enthusiasts. And it has really maintained that track record. And some of the events that we do throughout the year, or have done throughout the years, were things like City Sand, which was the sandcastle building competition that happens in downtown. The Tycho Blocks building that used to happen at the Enoch Pratt Library, where we would take over their window displays and have Tycho Blocks, which are effectively off-brand Lego, in the windows there, and you would see like this giant red Bromo Seltzer tower, and they were just fantastical ways to remind people of like the beauty and design of the city that they live in. But we also have, like, those were some of our major programs, but we work a lot with the Future Architects Resources / Kids in Design, and trying to find ways to get architectural education and appreciation within school curriculums. We have a Dead Architect Society, which has done so much research into, I think, Baltimore architecture, and that has a lot of overlap with the Baltimore Heritage and all of the other, I think, preservation-based organizations in Baltimore. But we've kind of touched all the facets, and we're really finding that our major claim to fame has been this Doors Open event, which is something that Chelsea Thomas of Mosley Architects brought to Baltimore just over 10 years ago. She lived in Denver and saw that they did this great, I think, program that had these what look like public buildings but are not, I think, public facing or not easy to access. They opened their doors literally and figuratively and welcomed the public. And that has kind of been the major push and focus of the foundation, really since the pandemic. A lot of our other programs kind of faltered and swayed, and we've been trying to get more of a footing under everything else. But Doors Open continues to be a success, and it grows every year. And it's really the way that people even understand that the foundation is out there. And every year we can make Doors Open more successful. I think we're able to bring more of the foundation's legacy events and new ideas to the forefront.
I feel like it's one of those ideas when I first learned about it, probably a dozen or so years ago. And when it first came to Maryland, where it was sort of like, it's so simple that it's kind of like elegant in its simplicity. It's like a perfect architectural, program. Cause like, I feel like some of the best architecture is when it's so simple that it's just like, oh, of course that you would do it that way. Like, it's just kind of like perfect. And, it doesn't require endless amounts of work to open a building. Now, it obviously there's a lot of logistics that go behind it and getting people out and opening up the buildings and all that kind of thing. But the idea in its essence and its core is very simple. Is it you mentioned that they brought it from Denver. Is there sort of a network of groups that do this all across the country now? Do we have any idea how many Doors Open they are? And is it always sort of associated with the architectural community?
So I have no idea how many different cities are doing this now, but it's always somewhat called Doors Open, opens doors, something. And for the most part, it has always been some sort of offshoot of AIA that I'm aware of. The first one I ever attended was actually in Chicago, and it was just, I think, mind-boggling to get to go into some of the towers on some gutted floors and actually get to like look down at the Aqua Tower. And that's just not a perspective that you ever get to see as a regular like suburbanite in Chicago. And I mean, when Chelsea brought it here that many years ago, like it was just such a much smaller event to the point where the committee was just doing it. And by the time we got to the 9 and 10 year mark, it got so big that we had to have an event planner to begin coordinating all of this. So seeing the year over year growth has been just amazing and insane to think about because people just get excited about seeing what their city has to offer.
Do you have any idea how many people are now on an annual basis getting into buildings?
I think last year we saw just over like 2,000. And I mean, last year might have been slightly skewed because it was the same time as the NOMA conference that was happening in Baltimore. But it has just continually grown year over year. And at this point, even if it was skewed by a major architectural conference being here, I think we kind of expect to see that keep growing beyond that number even this year.
So talk to us about the kind of sites that you have focused on getting on. I mean, I know it's a wide diversity of places, but give us an idea for somebody, within Maryland or beyond who's listening, who's like, okay, maybe that's a good weekend to come and visit. What would the kind of sites might they be able to enter?
Yeah. So you kind of hit the nail on the head, Nick. It is a wide range, but we really try and not focus on a singular like building typology. It's a mixture of arts sites, religious sites, buildings that might just have an interesting history, or some buildings are just new. And one of the sites that I'm personally most excited about is a building called Le Mondo. And it's a beautiful project in the Howard Street corridor here in Baltimore. And Howard Street has been it was a giant bustling area of Baltimore for so long. It had since fallen on some harder times. And there has been a lot of talk in investing back into that corridor and along that light rail and seeing it kind of being rebirthed. And I think Le Mondo was a great first step catalyst in bringing it back, where it was an old theater space, and they have since brought it back to be this artist hub where there will be performances, there will be gallery showings, and it's so fun and colorful and cultural that it kind of embodies everything that we want it to be about, where you can get excited about the city that you're seeing for the first time in this new light. And I mean, I've lived in Baltimore for just shy of 10 years now, and there's this one church in the Mount Vernon neighborhood of Baltimore that I have never been able to get in. I don't know if I'm just busy on Sundays. For the last 5 years, it's been closed just closed because the congregation had to close the church because of roof repairs. But it sold this year. It's being reopened, and we were able to get them on Doors Open. So I'm sure there's a lot of people like me that walk by these buildings every day that just have some level of interest and are like, I don't know what that is, but I would love to see it. And we can get those in. But there are other ones that are just very unassuming buildings. Like if you're walking downtown across from Streets Market on North Charles Street, there's the Grand Baltimore. And it looks like a very regular Baltimore building from the outside, but on the inside, it's a marble wonderland of color and texture. And there are just things that you don't expect to be behind some of these doors. Like it's truly a portal into a new world.
And it's free, right?
Yes, we have. It's really a 3-part event for us this year, and the biggest part of the event is the free one, where on Saturday, October 25th, we have 44-ish sites that all open their doors to the public. We've kind of split it into AM sites and PM sites because we're trying to really limit our volunteer kind of ask of people. And it helps kind of create a guided tour throughout the day where you can kind of move throughout the city in one direction. But some sites just aren't able to make that 25th work. So we do have paid guided tours for some of our other favorite sites happening throughout the entire month of October. And then last year we started doing a new kickoff event, which is a more Pachacucha style event where we get 5 to 6 Baltimore storytellers up there for 6 minutes, 20 slides, and they just tell us how Baltimore architecture and design has impacted their life. Last year, one of our speakers talked about the Fava Fruit Company, and his last name is Fava. He has the namesake. His family owned the fruit company. During the war, they took down almost all of the cast iron facades. This one was never melted down, and it ended up being reassembled. So his building still exists, just in a new home now, which is phenomenal. And it was so nice to hear it like firsthand about how that impacted him directly. And now that he actually works for the firm that helped put it back together.
Yeah, I mean, architecture is like one of those things where I think everyone, if they're probed about it or given an opportunity to think about it, they realize how much it impacts their life, whether it just be the home that they live in, that they grew up in, that they dream about, that they or the places that they aspire to move into, or the places that they enjoy visiting. I mean, it impacts everyone. I guess you'd have to literally live in a cave, in which case it would almost be architectural at that point, right? Like, I mean, there's
is that brutalism?
I think it might be. Wow, there we go. He said it, folks, not me. But yeah, so I mean, it's just great that you can engage with so many different people in like that opening event, talking about how architecture impacts people just in all these different ways, I think is really cool. I think the other thing too that I wanted to ask you about is that, like, I think there's a lot of, I mean, to say this is sort of an understatement, but there's distrust of institutions out there. People feel like they can't get the straight story from whatever institution it might be. And so as a result, there's sort of like, a distrust, and there's a sense that there isn't transparency. And I feel like events like this present like an opportunity for people to engage with different institutions in sort of a different way. That, like, if, this government agency is in a building and it throws its doors open, it's sort of like an opportunity to look in there and see what happens inside there. And it's no longer as secretive or as anonymous, whether that be a government agency or a nonprofit or a corporation, whatever that might be. Is that a sense? Is there a sense for that? Is there interest in that, in this kind of like idea of opening up the civil landscape of a city for people to kind of see what happens behind these closed doors?
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. I mean, even when I was volunteering for it last year, I was stationed at a site down in Locust Point, and it was a relatively remote site compared to where we have clusters elsewhere throughout the city. I mean, Locust Point is a much more isolated neighborhood, but the amount of people that came in those doors saying, I jog by here every day. I've always wondered what's in here. And just them being able to come in and see it, they felt so much more connected to their community, their neighborhood. Um, and I think that alone just kind of builds that level of trust that sometimes just does not happen when you walk by this building that has like tinted windows or shades down or anything. You're like, what happens behind there? I don't know. Um, and I think that's why we have, I don't know, maybe 30 sites that we try and get on every year because they're just fan favorites. But we always try and get new sites as well because the landscape of Baltimore is ever changing about who occupies what building. And sometimes it's just a great way to tell someone, be like, hey, this new building is occupied. And one of the fan favorites is the Amaranthian Museum that is over in Clipper Mill. And it's this beautiful museum that pretty much opens just once or twice a year. We're on their regular docket, but there's not really another time to go see this beautiful artwork and like his family still keeps it up. And over there, we're doing Corradetti Glass Studio and MCA architecture as well. And like, it's just a great way to see buildings in this old mill and different ways of people practicing art. Like architecture is a type of art, glass blowing, and then kind of like physical paint, canvas, abstract, collage, all of it happens there. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, there's like something in this, I feel like, for everyone. And you also mentioned, sort of talking about like big sites that are going to be on this year. You mentioned the church in Mount Vernon that's opening, which Preservation Maryland, which, as I mentioned, powers here PreserveCast, played a role in helping to secure. It was the fiscal sponsor of that project, working with this new Unite Mount Vernon group that's going to be opening up the Mount Vernon United Methodist Church, which is this massive 19th century church, 900 seat space in the middle of it, one of the largest seated spaces probably in the whole city, certainly from that time period. So that's going to be an exciting one. And I know staff of Preservation Maryland and the folks at Unite Mount Vernon, the new nonprofit that's been stood up to tell that story, are going to be there as well. Any other standout sites that you wanted to mention that are sort of like can't misses, particularly if people are listening, they're coming from Philly or New York or Richmond, and they're like, you know what, let's go to Baltimore that weekend. There's a bunch of cool things to do. Grab some food, stay in the city, catch a show, something like that. What are the ones that you're like, you can't miss this year?
I mean, I would say the church that we were just talking about, that so good. But I was also say like the SNF Parkway Theater. It's just, I don't know, 4 to 5 blocks north of that church. It is a beautiful kind of dichotomy of a new modern addition on a renovation and preservation of an old theater that shows movies now. And it's a beautiful project. And maybe I'm biased, but I also love the Harlem Theater. We don't get many projects out in the West Baltimore area, and that one overlooks a gorgeous park. It is just immaculate. The windows in that space are just inspiring alone. The list really goes on. One of our major partners this year is the Maryland Center for History and Culture. They're opening the Enoch Pratt House, which is the first time that's been open for us in a long time. And it's an info hub for us. It's where you can get maps and all of that. But they have phenomenal exhibits, and they're doing, I think, wonderful work in preserving, I think, just the culture of the city in Maryland in there. So definitely check them out as well.
Yeah, it's just a great. I mean, like, we're not particularly here trying to market the city, although we'll use it as an opportunity to do so. But I mean, it is a cool reason to come and visit, a great weekend to come and do that because there's so much going on, and then obviously there's just other sort of things that are always happening in Baltimore. I'm curious for someone listening who like they either can't make it this weekend or the weekend of the 25th, or they are maybe they could, but even still, they want this to happen in their community, whether that be in, Iowa or Alaska, and they're listening to this. Do you have any recommendations for people who are thinking about doing like a Doors Open in their own community? Because obviously Baltimore picked up the idea and ran with it when someone brought it here to them. Any guidance or any special thoughts or things people might want to take a look at?
I mean, the first thing I would say is just create a list. I mean, start asking around to your friends, your family. If you're comfortable approaching people on the street, being like, you live here, like, what's a building that you've always just kind of wondered, like, what is that building about? And I think once you have that list, maybe just start trying to casually organize guided tours. I mean, Doors Open, like, we did Tour Tuesdays for a long time, where every month we would just try and get a new tour. And going into 2026, that's how we want to kind of keep the Doors Open brand alive throughout the year and just start building that network and culture of finding ways to get people connected with the businesses, the churches, the organizations, just the buildings and design that occupy the space that we exist in is, I think, the biggest starting point. Because no matter where you live, whether it's rural or like highly dense urban, there's always going to be something of interest. There's always something that happened. And if you can find out what happened, there are always going to be the people that want to know about it. And just finding that interest of what makes this place interesting is, I think, always the big first step. And thankfully, places like Baltimore just have a laundry list of interesting, pivotal moments of history that allow us to sample different aspects here and there.
Yeah, and it's just a great opportunity to bring people together and see places sort of as a community. So I think there's a lot here for people to dig into. We're going to put links in the show notes for people to jump on and learn more about it. But, read off what is the URL? Where can people get all the information on all the events that are coming up? And then we'll put a link in there for you.
All right. So the big one that we've talked about a lot today is doorsopenbaltimore.org. That is the website where you will find all of the sites that we're doing this year, the maps, the tours that will basically link you to if you wanted to come down and purchase one of the guided tours. It's all there. If you have specific questions, doorsopenbaltimore@gmail.com is where you can kind of just ask certain things. If you're listening and saying, oh, I have a business that I would love to try and get people in, I mean, reach out. We try and do a survey every year to get new sites. And specifically, if General Ship Repair is listening, I want in your building so badly. Or on Instagram, you can find us at Doors Open Bmore. And I just want to be clear, it is Bmore on Instagram, not Baltimore. But those are the major hits for us, and where you can find all the things about the event and what else we put on throughout the year.
Fantastic. Before we go, we have a couple questions we ask most folks. The 250th anniversary of the country is coming up next year in 2026. And architecture obviously played, it plays a role in every moment in human history, or at least recorded human history, or even unrecorded. Where there's still architectural involvement in everything that has sort of transpired. And it obviously played a role in the formation of the United States. You think about sort of these key locations that we talk about as the backdrops, the Independence Hall and places even here in Baltimore, some which still stand, some which have been lost, but our State House and different spaces that kind of tell those stories. I'm curious if you as an architect and as someone who loves history, has any hopes for what the 250th might look like, and perhaps in your case, how architecture might have a story to tell during that commemoration and when all eyes are sort of on the history of the nation.
Man, that's a tough question. Um, I think the whole thing is I would love the America 250 event to really just highlight how far we've come and that we couldn't have gotten here if we didn't work together. I think now more than ever, that may just need to be heard again and again and repeated to us. But especially like in Baltimore for the 250, so much, I think, American history happened in and around this city. And you said it, some of the sites still exist, some of them don't. And I would love, whether it's our organization or any of the history-based Baltimore organizations, to, I think, maybe hold eulogies for the sites that no longer exist, or really celebrate the ones that still do. And then maybe identify maybe sites that when we look back in the next 250 years are super pivotal. Like, what are sites that we are taking for granted today that are truly impacting the everyday and the charter of this city? I think it'd be really, really interesting to have that forward-thinking approach, but also really reflect on what we had, because there were so many sites in Baltimore that sadly didn't survive the fire, that we've just lost to various developments, various reasons. But I would love to see those celebrated again, and even in a way that I've been talking about, trying to get an event together called Never Built Baltimore, and see what the landscape of the city would look like for all these projects that were ever proposed and just died on the vine for whatever reason. City approval, community approvals, just the city could be so different.
Yeah.
And it could
For
be
better
worse.
or
It
for
could be
worse.
worse.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Um,
we had a lot of different roads proposed over the years that would have wiped out different parts of the city. So, yeah, that's an interesting concept, and it sounds like you've got a ready-made theme for the 250th and Doors Open 2026. But first, Doors Open 2025 happens this year, October 25th, and we'll have links in the show notes to that. Before we go, we ask everyone this question, probably difficult for a history lover and certainly for an architect. Do you have a favorite building or historic site, a place that you could just go back to over and over again?
I was able to go visit Machu Picchu, but at the same point, just outside of that city and that site is a different monument called, and I may butcher this, it's called Sacsayhuaman. Um, and the level of building that went into that was phenomenal. It looks so simple based on how we view things today, but the level of craft and care that went into that to create this very defensible fort land cultivation is just mind-boggling. And really everything that I saw in like the highlands of Peru, so much of that climate and altitude and terrain, those groups of people had to overcome so much to be able to succeed. And the design and architecture and thought, I believe, was just light years ahead of where I think some other cultures were at that point in time. And I was just fully astounded. And it was truly one of the most breathtaking, I think, man-made things that I had ever seen that is still that old and well preserved.
Well, that's a perfect way to end the conversation. Cool place. I think the first time we've had that called out. So I love that. Always to have a new place for people to think about. And we'll make sure that people are aware of Doors Open Baltimore and opportunities to come up and see it. And also opportunities for people around the country who either can't make it or would like to, but just can't be here, to think about how they can do something like this in their own community. I think it's a great conversation for people to think a little bit about how we open up places and come together. And I've enjoyed having that conversation with you today, Kevin. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to PreserveCast. To dig deeper into this episode's story, head over to preservecast.org for show notes and our collection of previous episodes. Don't forget to engage with this podcast by subscribing, commenting, and leaving a review. Follow along on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PreserveCast for even more. PreserveCast is currently recorded in Walkersville, Maryland, and sponsored by the 1772 Foundation, and powered by Preservation Maryland. Thanks for listening, and keep on preserving.